He straight up admitted that his opinions are not supported by any data or any like factual evidence, but rather, and get this, his feelings. And they all went crazy for it. They loved it. They ate that shit up. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I know I've talked about Ben Shapiro many times, and I mean, hey, I don't even feel bad about it because Ben Shapiro is definitely not somebody that ever shies away from the trans community. So you get what you get, okay? Not even that. You get what you give. What's the expression? Along with him posting those cringy, like reacting to TikTok videos, he also recently posted a video where he went to a college campus and did like a talk and then had a little Q&A session afterwards. And if you've ever seen those college videos where he goes to college campuses and has these talks and has these discussions, he always puts them up on YouTube as like, Ben Shapiro destroys college student, or Ben Shapiro goes to college campus and destroys transgenderism. But in my honest opinion, I don't think he really did. So yeah, for today's video, we are going to be reacting to this video right here that Ben Shapiro posted. Actually, just like a clip of it. It's a long video. We don't have to react to all of it. But one person brought up the trans conversation and Ben had a lot to say about it. And I couldn't just let him, you know, go off and say all these things without being checked. So that's what I'm here to do today. I post new videos every single week here on my channel. So if you guys are not yet subscribed, go ahead and do that right now. I'll wait for you. Go ahead. Are you done? Thank you very much. Also, make sure to follow me over on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all those different places to keep us up to date with me as possible. But yeah, with no further ado, let's get right into this Q&A section, shall we? So like I said, this video is not one of Ben's typical style videos. This is a recording of a Q&A that happened at a college campus that he went to, where some of the college students got to come up and ask him different questions. Ben and this student, I'm assuming, go back and forth quite a little bit. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with the question that this person placed. So go ahead.
Why do you believe you're right about trans people given the American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Psychoanalytic Association? I can go on for about 5 more associations that are very prominent and govern the existing like health government or health industries within like the major Western countries. And all of these associations have multiple thousands of doctors, sociologists, psychologists, and with PhDs in their respective fields backing the idea that sex and gender are different, effectively gaining the medical consensus for sex and gender being 2 different concepts, yet you have a different opinion.
So to summarize, their question was, why do you not believe that gender and sex are different when all these different medical associations, all these different scientific communities all agree that sex and gender are different? And you know, in the past I would just say, yeah, they're right. Like medical associations all agree that sex and gender are different, but I got the screenshots for you this time. Don't worry. According to the American Medical Association, it is essential to acknowledge that an individual's gender identity may not align with the sex assigned to them at birth. So the American Psychological Association says sex usually refers to the biological aspects of maleness or femaleness, whereas gender implies the psychological, behavioral, social, and cultural aspects of being male or female. The American Psychoanalytic Association. Psychoanalytic technique does not encompass purposeful attempts to convert, repair, change, or shift an individual's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Such directed efforts are against fundamental principles of psychoanalytic treatment and often result in substantial psychological pain by reinforcing damaging internalized attitudes. The World Health Organization says gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. Like, the list goes on and on.
Sex and gender are 2 different concepts, but gender is tied to biology. So one of the big problems that you see in sort of the argument in favor of trans rights is this notion that gender and sex are completely separable. They're not completely separable. If they are completely separable, then this means that identifying people by their subjective gender really has no relevance as to whether they are a male or a female. Male and female are biological terms. So using terminology like male and female to describe a self-perception of maleness or femaleness is sort of a bizarre way of arguing whether a thing is a man or a woman. So here's my question. It's an argument that my friend Matt Walsh likes to make. What is a woman? Define what a woman is without reference to the word woman, please.
So he agrees and says that sex and gender can refer to different ideas because he would look pretty dumb if he did not agree with that. However, immediately then effectively backtracks and says that gender is tied to biology. So if biology is the same as sex, and you're saying that gender is tied to biology, then you're saying that gender is tied to sex. Like, you can't just say that they are and then that they're not. Like, make up your mind. He says if gender and sex are separable, then a person's gender has nothing to do with the sex that they are. And that's right. That's correct, Ben Shapiro. Of course, this can be a bit unintuitive. You know, for most people that are born, their gender identity aligns with their sex. So they never really have to consider that their gender identity is not the same as their sex. Trans people don't have that option. We're kind of forced to think about it. We're forced to deal with that reality. I think the best way to just sum that little tidbit up is just to remember that correlation does not always equal causation. So just because most people that are born male identify as a boy, that does not mean that because they were born male, they identify as a boy. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I'm moving on. So I did my best to make sense out of what he was trying to say. All right, I did my best. I tried to give him a little bit of credit. He goes on to say that male and female are biological terms. So you can't identify as a trans female because it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, that does make a little bit of sense to me because he's right that male and female are words that dictate sex and refer to sex, which again is somebody's biology or somebody's anatomy. And personally, at the moment, my opinion is just because you are a trans woman or just because you identify as a trans woman, that does not automatically mean that you are physically female. However, I also believe that sex is more than just the genitalia of a person. I think it's a combination of, chromosomes, external genitalia, internal genitalia, hormone levels, hormone response levels, primary, secondary sex characteristics. It's this whole list of factors that go into making up somebody's their sex. And I also believe that once a trans woman starts a medical transition, she's no longer entirely biologically male. I wouldn't say that she's entirely biologically female, but I mean, definitely not biologically male. I wouldn't say that they weren't born biologically male, but I would say at the current moment, they aren't. So when it comes to sex identification on government IDs, I see no problem with allowing a trans woman who has just transitioned, even a trans woman that has not undergone medical transition. I see no problem with allowing her to change her sex marker to female. We really have to consider the utility of that sex marker. It's not the chromosomes or your genitalia. It's just about how you operate in the world, who you operate as in the world. So to be honest, I'd propose that they change a sex marker to a gender marker. I feel like that makes a little bit more sense. But when it comes to sex markers on, say, hospital forms, I think that's a little bit of a different conversation because at that point, the utility of that marker is not to figure out who you live as in the world. They're looking at your body. I mean, you all know what a doctor does. You know what I mean? I don't have to explain this. I don't know why he brought up the whole, can you define a woman for me then, please? Is that that's all you got to say? Define a woman, that's your go-to thing? Very simply, a woman is the gender that is typically associated with the female sex. That's it. But again, I just don't see how that's relevant to the question that this person asked, which is, why do you disagree with the medical, scientific, and academic consensus? But, I mean, you ask your question, go off.
So this is actually a logical fallacy called a red herring. You're asking me a question in order to actually challenge my question without actually
No, it isn't. I'm saying
that
it really is not.
The questioner comes back and is like, this is actually a logical fallacy. That, I don't know why you're bringing this up. I'm glad that this person was blunt about it. If you don't know what a red herring is, you could Google it, but look at me, I'm going to give you a little information. A red herring is a fallacy that consists in diverting attention from the real issue by focusing instead on an issue having only a surface relevance to the first. And again, maybe I'm missing something, but defining a woman, I don't see how that answers the question.
I'm agreeing with you that the notion of gender, which is effeminateness or masculinity, can be different from biology in the sense that biology is just pure male or pure female. But to suggest that there is such a thing as an effeminate male is not to suggest that an effeminate male is now a woman. Transgenderism makes the argument that if you believe that you are a woman, you are therefore a woman. Or if you believe that you are a man, you are therefore a man. I disagree with this. There are objective measures as to whether you're a man or a woman. There are objective measures as to whether you're male or female. There's certainly a spectrum when with regard to effeminateness versus masculinity. That's certainly true, but that does not change the underlying sexual dichotomy that is the basis for all human reproduction.
So again, he starts out his answer by framing it like he agrees with this medical consensus because he can't not, he can't explicitly disagree with this medical consensus because he will just look stupid. He starts out by saying, yeah, I agree that gender can be different than sex, but then again, backtracks, and this time not only backtracks, but throws in a few different strawman arguments to try to, again, distract from this actual issue of why do you not agree with medical consensus? He mistakenly refers to gender as effeminacy, femininity or masculinity, not what gender is. Okay, it's not. Just because somebody feels feminine does not mean that they are a girl. Just because somebody feels masculine does not mean that they're a boy. This kind of goes along with the whole, they're pushing our children to transition. They're making my young tomboy daughter become a boy. Being transgender is not fun. It's not fashionable. It's dangerous. It's painful. And it's unavoidable. When you're trans, you can't not be trans. You don't have a choice. In my opinion, the trans community is super welcoming and accepting of everybody, young or old, expressing their gender however makes them feel comfortable. If you're happy as a tomboy, then I'm happy. You know what I mean? I don't need you to be a boy. That's totally, I'm good. I have no interest in making kids trans. Don't need that. I just want to help young trans kids be okay with who they are. As to the whole disagreeing that feeling like a woman can make you a woman, But once again, that's just the medical and scientific consensus. Like, we can look, the World Health Organization, gender identity refers to a person's deeply felt, internal, and individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond to the person's physiology or designated sex at birth. He goes on to say there are objective measures to determine whether you're male or female. And like, you're right, there are. Again, that's sex, not gender, but we'll go with it. To determine somebody's sex, most of the time doctors will just look at somebody's genitalia and be like, okay, male, female, whatever. But there are also tests such as like chromosome tests. You can do an ultrasound to look at like the internal structures. There are some options, and those options are all possible because when we're determining somebody's sex, we're looking at their physicality. We're looking at their anatomy, something that is very physical, something that's right there, you know, something that we can grab. Maybe don't grab, but you know what I'm saying. It's all there. So yeah, he's right. There are objective measures to determine if you are male, female, or intersex, you know, somewhere in between, because it is not just male and female. We'll get there. However, he also says that there is an objective measure to determine whether you're a man or a woman. And I feel like this is like upsetting to people because they're like, well, I need proof. I need to see the evidence that you're a man or that you're a woman. I can't give that to you. I'm so sorry. There isn't a test to determine whether you're a man or you're a woman because, as the World Health Organization said, as all these different, you know, organizations and associations have said, gender is a feeling. Gender is a self-perception. And how do we determine self-perceptions? Well, I don't fucking know. He finishes this little segment of his argument by saying that there is a spectrum to gender, but that doesn't change the underlying sexual dichotomy that is integral to human reproduction. Okay, Ben, why'd you have to bring that up? Nobody's trying to say that males and females aren't necessary for reproduction. Like, I took Bio 101. I took sex ed. We're just trying to say that gender and sex are different concepts, which you seem to agree with, or do you not?
Right, so this dichotomy is a false dichotomy that isn't supported by any of the medical associations that I just named
Then
off.
let me
None
explain.
of the medical associations that I just named off would actually support the idea that gender is biological. This is something that's completely untrue within every single like medical consensus.
And once again, they're right. Sex is not a dichotomy, or in other words, a binary. I've discussed this before, so to save my breath, I'm going to insert a little YouTube short. She explains so beautifully why sex is not binary. So go ahead, Riley.
Let's talk about why biological sex is non-binary. When we say that something is binary, that means it's a variable that can produce only one of two possible values. Take binary code. Every value is a 1 or a 0. If there's even a single 2, it's not binary. Binary works for things like on or off and true or false. Notice that in these systems, you can never have something that is both true and false or on and off at the same time. This will be important later. This is why using chromosomes to define biological sex would mean that it's non-binary, since there are plenty of instances where people have something other than XX or XY chromosomes. Some of these include Klinefelter syndrome, where someone is born with XXY chromosomes, triple X syndrome, where someone is born with XXX chromosomes, or Turner syndrome, where someone is missing part of or an entire X chromosome. That being said, another way people may try to define biological sex to be binary is by focusing on whether someone produces large or small gametes, or whether they produce eggs or sperm. But even here, we find that it's not always the case that people produce just one or the other. There are also documented instances of people producing both types of gametes, meaning that even using gametes to define sex would entail at least 3 sex categories, if not more. No matter how you define it, biological sex just is not binary.
Quite interesting, right? So interesting. Let's see how Ben is going to talk his way out of this one, shall we?
I will just say that anyone who suggests that gender has no reference whatsoever to biology, it's not connected in any way to biology, is just full of shit. Because if the and the reason I and the reason that I say
then you actually just disagree with medical consensus within the Western nation.
Yes, I disagree with the false medical consensus driven by politically driven, quote unquote, doctors. If any doctor denies to me that there is a dichotomy between male and female, a sexual dichotomy between male and female, they are ignorant and they are letting their politics get in the way of their science. Anybody who suggests to you that there is such a thing, for example, as a pregnant male is not a doctor, they are an activist.
I mean, at least he's honest. He's like, listen, I know the entirety of all these medical and scientific and academic communities all agree that I'm wrong, but they're full of shit. AKA, I don't have a better argument, so I'm just going to say that they're lying. Again, yes, males and females have differences, obviously. And again, yes, one male and one female is required for traditional reproduction. Boring. You're boring me, Ben. We are once again talking about sex, not gender. No, somebody born male will never be able to naturally give birth. You're right, that's fine. But someone who is a man may be able to if they have the right parts. Because again, as Ben taught us earlier, male and female are words that dictate sex, while man and woman are words that dictate gender. And gender, according to the medical and academic and scientific communities, is not tied to biology. Now, if you were to clarify and say that you were a cisgender man, that would provide us more information and we could say, yeah, no, that person would never be able to give birth. The only reason that we make this clarification is because when you say that no men can give birth, you're obviously excluding trans men. Trans men are men and they sometimes can give birth. He straight up admitted that his opinions are not supported by any data or any like factual evidence, but rather, and get this, his feelings. And they all went crazy for it. They loved it. They ate that shit up.
I'm very glad that none of these opinions are actually accepted in academia and haven't been for over 70 years. Sent this here on Twitter.
Okay.
The questioner comes back and says, I'm glad these opinions haven't been supported in academia in 70 plus years, so whatever. Ben comes back. He's mad. He's real riled up. He is furious.
The notion that they haven't been accepted for over 70 years is a bizarre one, considering they were accepted until about 5 minutes ago. And the basic idea that male and female do not exist runs counter to all mammalian biology, all of it, not just human. Are we to suggest that gender and sex are different in walruses? How does this work exactly? Like, are they different in bears? All mammalian reproduction is rooted in the idea that there's a sexual dichotomy between male and female. To obscure that with all sorts of semantic word games about how you feel subjectively has no bearing on whether male and female are categories that exist. And if you're trying to define male and female with reference to any subjective category that cannot be identified by any metric whatsoever other than how you feel today, I challenge whether that is scientific or whether that is merely a self-perception that is being guided by a political agenda.
The notion that these ideas haven't been supported for 70 years is bizarre, considering they've been supported up until 5 minutes ago. No, they haven't. No, they haven't. These ideas are not supported in academia now, and they haven't been for quite some time. But Ben just tries to appeal to his audience's lack of knowledge on the current conversation surrounding gender and sex, and tries to make it seem like trans activists are coming out of nowhere and changing everything and ruining everything from how it's always been. But that's not the case. A fluid perception of gender has actually been around much, much longer than this binary perception. Third genders, trans people, etc. have been documented for centuries. Much longer than Ben's binary framework of male and female that has only been used really within the last century. Ben's own religion recognizes no fewer than 6 distinct sex categories throughout all of their classical texts and traditions. So I'm like, he continues and throws in more straw men of they're trying to get rid of males and females and they're trying to erase what it means to be a male and a female. Like, I can't even get this out. Respectfully, shut the fuck up. No, we're not. You just don't have an argument and need a little soundbite for your audience. I mean, it worked. So, I love the part where he compares us to walruses and bears, and he's like, well, do walruses have differences between sex and gender? Do bears? Ben. Maybe if walruses had different expectations and roles for female walruses versus male walruses, we would recognize the difference between sex and gender in different mammals, but they don't. And you're kind of really weird for that. We're the only mammals, the only animals that have this social conception of gender. Like, do you really not see the difference between us and walruses? I mean, he says, we can't define male and female by your subjective daily feelings. Once again, Ben, as you said earlier, male and female dictate sex. And your gender identity is not informed nor defined by your sex. What are you talking about? Like, how do people watch this and think like, wow, he did such a great job. I can't wait to just, you know, my king. He really pulled out those facts and those sources and that evidence. No, he didn't. He literally just talked about how he felt. He talked about his feelings, which is fine. You know, I have empathy. I care about your feelings, Ben. Do I? Bravo. Bravo to whoever this questioner was. They did say their Twitter app, but I could not figure out what they said. So I wish I could shout them out, but I can't. If you guys know who this was, put them in the comments, whatever. Shout out to them. I really hope the average viewer of this conversation, of, you know, even Ben's video, not even this video, but like Ben's video, I hope they understand how like unhinged he sounds. We have all this data and all this evidence for one thing, and you're just disagreeing with it. Like, why? He tries to avoid the question several times, and then it's just like, well, they're full of shit. That's why. Great argument. Great job. So yeah, that's that for that. What do you guys think? Let me know. If you did like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up down below. It really helps out my channel a lot, so I'd really appreciate it. I post videos every single week here on my channel, so subscribe if you are not already, and you would like to be, only if you want to be. But yeah, other than that, I think I'm going to go. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.